Welcome to High-End Homes Handled Right. This is the Real Property Management Luxury Podcast hosted by Lyndel Johnson. So this week, I received about, I would say, 4 calls from homeowners that wanted our services. And they all asked the same question, and that is, how do you deal with evictions? Evictions. Today's episode, we're going to talk about what an eviction is, how to deal with evictions, and really what the overall process is when you're actually having to evict a tenant. All right, so you have this amazing tenant living in your house. Maybe they've been paying on time for the first 5 months of a lease, and then all of a sudden something happens. Maybe there's an accident, or maybe they had car issues and they had to take the car to the mechanic, and then all of a sudden they are behind. They're behind on rent. 1 month becomes 2 months behind, becomes 3 months behind, 4 months. Now you're stuck with a tenant that's living in your house and you can't get rid of them. Or you think you can't. What do you do? A lot of homeowners and landlords ask about, how do you evict a tenant? Well, it's a long process, and actually every state that you're in and every county has different rules and regulations. So when we talk about today with eviction, the whole eviction process, we're speaking as if you are a homeowner or a landlord, should I say, that's in Texas. An eviction is really an emotional and has a huge financial impact on both parties. You know, you're not receiving the payment on time, so maybe you have a mortgage, so it's really hurting your pocket. And then you've got a tenant who is not paying, and now they're being told they're going to get evicted. And so now they can't sleep, and they're upset, and they're going to lose their home, and maybe they've got kids are in school. This is just such a horrible situation to be in. But unfortunately, there is no way to really prevent it. You can do your best. You can do your best when you're doing your screening. You can get the best possible tenant you think possible. And, life happens. And next you know, you're going to have to evict. There are early warning signs when there's eviction or you may have to evict someone. Eviction doesn't just happen. A tenant doesn't just automatically just not pay and then, you're going to go to eviction. Usually it doesn't happen. Usually there is a sign, maybe leading up to, maybe they're late. They've been late a couple of times, and then maybe that you've called them and they're not, communicating back to you. Maybe they're not answering the phones. Maybe they're not returning calls, returning emails. These are real signs that maybe something is awry. Do not automatically believe that things are going to be okay, and then don't allow it to continue going on. So this is what you need to do. If rent is due on the 3rd, per your lease, on the 4th, there's a notice that needs to be given, which is usually called a 3-day notice. 3-day notice says, okay, contact us within 3 days. We can do a payment plan. And if not, then it's going to go to eviction. This is a mandatory document when you go to eviction court. You're going to go in front of the judge, and the judge is going to ask you, have you delivered a 3-day notice? How did you do it? You must know how you've delivered it, and you must have proof on how you delivered it as well. But not only that, you don't want a balance to keep growing month after month after month. Usually what I tell my clients is that, after 2 months, I would probably bet that it's a 90% chance that tenant is never going to recover. You get to 2 months behind on rent, I would say they're never going to recover. That's a big statement. That's a huge statement. So don't let it get that far. If they're late even the first time on the 4th, just do what you need to do and give that 4-day notice. if you're a tenant and you receive that 4-day notice, you need to respond to it. You need to call the office, call the landlord, email the office, email the landlord, basically communicate and explain, maybe there is an issue. Maybe there's an issue that, you plan on paying half, this week and half next week. But you can consider that a payment plan. Or maybe, this is just something that you forgot. Maybe you were on vacation and forgot to make the payment. Now you've returned from vacation. There's so many things that can happen that can cause it. But you really want to make sure that you communicate back so that, that landlord, that homeowner knows what's taking place. So they're not thinking, okay, this is definitely an eviction about to happen. No homeowner wants to evict a tenant. Nobody wants that to happen. It's actually because it costs money. It costs money, and it's just sad. A homeowner would rather you pay on time or even, have a payment plan rather than having to take you to court. Later on, we'll talk about, how long an eviction process takes and the very, the steps that go in it. And it's not something where you could just take someone to court and within 2 days they're out. It is a process. And sometimes that process is longer based on the county you're in. Here in Texas or in Houston area, Harris County has a longer eviction process than, I would say, maybe Fort Bend. So it all depends on where you're located. Now that you've considered evicting, we talked about the differences between different counties and different states that you're in. Here in Texas, there's, I would say, 3 different steps. You've served the notice. You've put the notice on the door. That was step 1. During that's putting that notice on the door or delivering that notice by hand or mailing it, you've done that. Now it's gone 4 days past that, and now no one's contacted you back. The tenant hasn't returned your calls, hasn't responded to your notice. Now you have to actually file the eviction. This can cost about, I would say, from $115 to $150, depending where you are. Okay, so now that's the cost. And this is if you're doing it yourself and you're not going and getting an attorney or someone to do it for you. Once you do that, you file for the eviction, then there's a court hearing. They give you your date. That could be about from 10 to 21 days from the time you filed to the time that you get your court date. So now, 21 days later, you have the court date. You show up to the court. The tenant shows up. The judge asks to look at the ledger. He also asks you, have you delivered the notice? You state yes. And then they'll give you a verdict, meaning they'll say, okay, well, I agree. The eviction is going to go forward and you must leave. Now, if you're now going to take over the unit, you have to file for a writ of possession, meaning, they'll send a sheriff to the house, and on that date, that tenant must be gone and out on it. If not, then they're going to take everything from the house and put it outside. That's a very sad thing to happen, and it's very sad to see, especially when when the kids are involved. But it happens, and that's part of the eviction process. Once that judgment takes place, before that writ, that tenant does have an opportunity to file a claim and basically state that the judgment was wrong, and they can appeal that process. They have 5 days to do that. And if they don't, then obviously it does go to that writ. So in total, from the time that you've given the 3-day notice to the time that you've gotten the judgment to the time to the writ where you now can actually say the house is yours and it's empty, that's now 2 months of payments that you're not receiving, 2 months where you had to pay the mortgage and you couldn't, and you still have the back pay that you didn't receive. This is just, once again, it's just a tough situation that many homeowners are in, and many homeowners have to deal with right now, present day. Let's talk about, how do you protect your investment? What do you do? What's the use of renting your home if this can happen? That's a valid question. But what you can do is just really, really screen well on the front end. And when you're screening, you're not just looking to see if they have a good credit score. You're not just looking to see, if they have a great job, which of course is very, very important. But you also want to make sure that whatever your rent amount is, can they pay rent plus more? If someone is paying rent and they're barely making it, they can pay the rent, yes, and they're paying on time. What happens if their engine of their car doesn't work anymore? Or let's say that something happens, an accident at work, they have to go to the hospital. One bad issue may take them out. And now you're in a process where you may have to evict this person. So you want to make sure they make, some companies do 2.5 times the rent. Some companies do 3 times the rent. Just make sure that they make more than what you're asking for rent. And if not, it's not a smart move to push them in. Now, renting properties is I would say it's slower than normal this year so far. And so there are a lot of homes that have been sitting in the market. When a home is sitting on the market for a long period of time, some homeowners get desperate. They're like, oh my gosh, we have an applicant, so we need to get them in. We need to get them in. They have great credit score, and it looks like they can pay for the rent. They can pay the rent, and everything looks good, and it's a nice family. Do not go with your feelings, and do not be desperate. Do not be desperate, because once again, I just explained the whole eviction process. Do not go with your feelings, because if you have to evict, then what do? If you're a property management company and you have to evict someone, you have just lost the trust of your client, because your client trusted that you screened well. And your client is trusting that they're actually going to receive the rent on time so that they can pay for their mortgage. That's why they have you. They have you there to help make sure that happens. So do all you can in the front end when you screen. Another thing to do is to make sure that you just don't be lax on your operation, your procedures. Make sure that on the 4th, if that's the day that you're going to give the 3-day notice, give it. Even if you have a relationship with the tenant and you think the tenant is great and it's just a mistake for that month, it doesn't matter. Make sure you give that 3-day notice. Make sure that after you give that 3-day notice that you're calling and you're sending emails asking, hey, I know you've received it. We've delivered it. What are the next steps? We need to do a payment plan. If not, we're going to have to go to eviction. Be strong and make sure you show your strength. Show that, this is a business. This is not personal. Because once again, you've got an owner who has to pay their mortgage. So just make sure you stick to your guns and do the right procedures. Once again, this is High-End Homes Handled Right, the Real Property Management Luxury Podcast.